Pastor George Borkard, and this is another Higher Things video short. Galatians 4, 10 and 11, Bible Study Thursday, and why it's okay to worship on Christmas and Easter and Saturday, and why the Seventh-day Adventists may be going a little too far with the law. That's the subject of today's Higher Things video short. Hey, if you love our videos, if you are learning about your faith from some place that you never expected to learn about your faith from, a Lutheran pastor and his sleeping Jack Russell Terrier, go ahead and like and subscribe today. You can also go to support.higherthings.org and give today. Your tax-deductible gift keeps Higher Things, a youth organization all about passing the faith to the next generation, keeps us going. So we're looking at Galatians 4 in Bible Study Thursday. Paul had laid the gospel out for the Galatians. Then other people had come in, Judaizers, and put a bunch of non-biblical laws upon them. You know, that stuff that Paul said was great, but you really need to sort of get circumcised. That stuff that Paul said was great, but you need to sort of observe certain days and months and seasons. Real Christians do that. So 4:10 is Paul sort of saying, let's go back to 4:9. But now that you have come to know God, or rather are known by God, how can you turn back to the weak and elemental, worthless principles of the world whose slaves you want to be once more? And so Paul lays out, says, you have been rescued, you've been baptized, you've been set free from all of this. Why would you go back to these laws the way things were before? And then he gets to our text today, which is verse 10 and following. He says, you observe carefully days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that I may have, perhaps I have worked or labored for you in vain. Brothers, I beg you, know this. I sort of become like me, because I've become like y'all, brothers. I beg you. You did me no wrong, and we'll get to the rest of it. It's for freedom that Christ has set you free. You are free in Christ to live each day as if the Lord has made it, to worship each day of the week, to treat each day as the same, or to put some importance upon some days more than other days. But what you're prohibited from, what the Lord would keep you from, is the idea that if you don't put some day as more important than another's, if you don't worship on a certain day, then God doesn't love you. You see, Christ has set you free from all the religion of men, which put things as more important than other things and judge people by their external observances. Christ has set you free from all of that, to live by faith in the Son of God who loved you and gave up his life for you. And that means you are free in Christ to worship on Saturday, the Sabbath. But you are also free in Christ to worship God on Sunday, the Lord's Day, the day he rose from the dead. And the early church began to worship on Sundays because that was the day the Lord rose from the dead. His day, the Lord's day, the first day of the week. Where else would they worship other than the day the Lord rose from the dead? Sunday. And they picked up various festivals along the way, which helped them focus their worship. Seasons like Advent and Lent and the like. These days flowed from the Bible, but they weren't required. The world doesn't come to an end if you don't worship on Easter, or you don't have the right date for Easter, or the like. It all, because everything depends upon Jesus. And so you are free to observe the seasons. You're also free not to. But what you're not free to do is to judge others whether they were observe the seasons or not. And what was going on in Galatia was that the idea became that you have to worship on these days for God to love you, to be a Christian. Look, if you want to worship on Saturday rather than Sunday, awesome sauce. If you want to worship on Christmas or don't want to worship on Christmas, awesome sauce. But what you can't do is put a law on someone and say that if they don't do these things, somehow they're less Christian than you. And that's what Paul's saying here. The slavery is the slavery to man-made rules over and against the freedom of the gospel, which is in Christ. And so, to our Seventh-day Adventist friends, we point to this verse and say, look, don't tell us that we have to worship on Saturday. We're free to worship on Sunday. Don't tell us that we can't worship on a certain day, because that's the day we'll be forced to worship on or be free to worship on. And if you want to worship on Christmas, great. But if you don't want to worship on Christmas, that's okay too. But what you can't do is think that these days somehow make you more holy than somebody else, or not worshiping on these days makes you more holy. Like we learned earlier this week, doing something and don't doing something doesn't merit favor with God. What merits Christ is the only righteousness before the Father. So whether you worship on Saturday or Sunday, all that matters is Christ and his gifts. Think about it. I'm Pastor George Borkart, and this has been another Higher Things video short.